Hi, this is Misha, and today's video is on the Walther P99 and the whole family it has spawned over the last 20 years. We have a series called Walther Classics, so it might be good to kind of go back and look at the company's models that got them on the map in the 20th century, such as the original Model 4, the PPK, P38, P1, P5, and P88. It's a very interesting history, and you can definitely see where a lot of the development led to the P99, which is right here. This is the P99. This is a original production version, sometimes referred to as a Gen 1. And this is Walther's first polymer-framed service handgun. Work on this began in 1994. At that time, Walther was still manufacturing the P88. It had introduced the P88 compact a short time ago, and it was still making the P88 full-size, although it was very much on the way out. The P88 was really Walther's first Wonder 9, high-capacity 9mm double single-action. It was a great gun, but it was expensive. And by the 90s, the whole dural alloy frame concept was kind of transitioning over to polymer thanks to Glock. Now, interestingly, when this was in development at Karl Walther in Ulm, Germany, Horst Wesp, formerly of Glock, actually came over and helped construct the P99. So there's obviously going to be some Glock similarities here too. Now, the P99 was designed with the German police in mind. Also, ergonomics were very important when they were doing it. In fact, it was so important that they hired an Italian Olympic champion, Cesare Marini, to design this grip. That's why it might look a little odd, but it's extremely comfortable. It fits the hand very well. Now, this gun, as I said, went into development in '94. You first started to see kind of pre-production prototype advertisements in 1996, and this became commercially available in 1997. So the P99 nomenclature is a little misleading. It actually came out before 1999. Now, at this time, in 1996, 1997, there were not that many polymer frame guns on the market. Yes, Walther was there, and they weren't the only ones, of course, but you had Glock and not a whole lot of others. CZ was starting to play with polymer at the time. The Smith & Wesson M&P was long from coming out. The HS2000, which became the Springfield XD, was still several years out. I'm trying to think of other polymer frame guns, but there just weren't that many in production at the time. The HK had its Mark 23, which became the USP, but that's really about it. Seems like the Germanic countries were kind of leading the charge when it came to polymer frame. So in the general senses, this is a lot like a Glock, but when it came out, it was still a member of a pretty exclusive club. It is a striker-fired gun with a steel slide and a polymer frame with reinforced. Again, though, it has a much more ergonomic grip. If you compare this to the Glock Gen 2s of the 90s, the grip is much more ergonomic. One thing that Walther pioneered with the P99 that everyone does today are interchangeable back straps. This was the first production gun to have these. It came with 3 sizes, small, medium, large. Here's some other ones that it comes with. So that was definitely a step forward to let the grip be more customizable. It has a 4-inch barrel. It's overall 7 inches, 7.1 inches, so just a hair over 7 inches tip to tip. It weighs 22 ounces, so it's pretty analogous to a Glock 19. Even though they consider it a full-size service gun, it's more of a size like a Glock 19. It's a little bit taller, simply because it has more of a straight vertical type grip. It fed from 16-round double-stack magazines. And these are very similar to the mags used in the P88. The major difference is the polymer base plate on these. It has a proprietary so-called closed accessory rail under the barrel here on what's sometimes referred to as the dust cover. So it's not a Picatinny rail, it's a proprietary, but you could attach a device to it. Again, a pretty cutting edge feature for the mid-90s. It has an ambidextrous mag release here on the trigger guard. This is pretty much straight copied from the HK P7M8, and I love this mag release. I find it extremely handy. You know, most of the so-called ambidextrous guns today, they have a reversible mag release, so you can make it left or right-handed friendly, but it can't be both at the same time. This is both. You can use either hand to do it. It's extremely easy. I really think people who complain about this, it's a training issue, not a design issue. They're so stuck on the 1911 and guns based on it that they're trying to blame the gun for a fault that it doesn't have. It's just them. They haven't trained on it. I'm sure if they did, they would love this design. It's really one of the best mag releases out there. So that's the gun. Now I've kind of left the most interesting feature of this till last. As I said, it is a striker-fired gun. However, it has a very interesting trigger system. First off, you saw me charge the weapon. It has a decocker here. This was also used if you wanted to disassemble it and not pull the trigger. But when it's in standard mode, we have double action. So that can provide double, triple, quadruple shots, or not shots, but I'm saying strike, if you have a dud cartridge. Now, if you pull the slide back just a quarter of an inch, we now go into what they call anti-stress mode. This trigger is still forward, but it's extremely light pull, and it stages back to a single action trigger here, which has extremely light, crisp reset. I'm just taking that out so I can try to hold it back here. It's an extremely short reset of about 0.2 of an inch. That trigger there on this one is about 4.5 pounds, although this is an older gun. I think when it was new it was probably closer to 5. Even in double action mode, it's a longer pull and it's definitely heavier, but it's not insanely heavy. It's about 8 pounds. And for a polymer gun, it's very smooth. And again, if you cock it, and it's in single, and you don't want to have a live round with a cocked hammer behind it, press the decocker and the trigger springs forward. To me, this always seemed like a very versatile system and just extremely well thought out. It disassembles just like a Glock, but even easier in my opinion. It has this tab you just pull down on. That's it. Internals are just like a Glock. And this is the original P99, the double single action trigger. This one here has a green frame. It's just what it is. Most of them had black. Walther sold this as the military model at some point. This was released in 1997. In 1999, Walther released a double action only version for police use called the P99C. And again, that was mostly for police use. In 2000, they released the P99QA, which stood for quick action, which was essentially a Glock style trigger. And we'll get to that in just a second, one of those. But it's just like it's a partially cocked striker like a Glock. They would also release this in .40 caliber Smith & Wesson. And importers would switch from Inner Arms in the beginning to Smith & Wesson. So it was a partnership there. It's worth noting before it gets brought up that all of the 9mm P99s like this one were produced in Germany at all. However, some of the .40 calibers had slides and barrels made by Smith & Wesson. This is because when the P99 first came out, there was a pretty good demand for it, and Walther couldn't always keep up. It sold well enough in the USA, but really it was in Europe. This was designed for the German police, and they met with some pretty good success. By the late 90s, early 2000s, a lot of police departments were kind of getting tired of their worn-out old guns. Some of them had older Walther P5s or SIG P6s or even older 32s, and they were ready to trade up. So you actually saw about half a dozen large German police departments adopt this P99, and it had pretty good success internationally too. Finland, for example, would have different agencies and police that would adopt the P99 as the PIS 2003. In Poland, not only would some police adopt it, Radom, FB Fabryki Breni Radom, would purchase a manufacturing license for it. You would also see this used in the Netherlands, Denmark, Malaysia, Estonia purchased it more recently. It keeps going on. Portugal, so on and so forth. The UK and Ireland even purchased some. Even Canada, a few of the police agencies up there have purchased some. So this saw some pretty good wide. I mean, considering it wasn't a Glock, it was probably one of the best competitors to the Glock early on, for sure. But this was the original P99, and this is what was referred to as the Gen 1. In 2004, Walther started to update the P99 a bit. It had been on the market for about 8 years, and some changes were requested. Feedback had been given. And that's where this came from here. Now, they first introduced the P99C, P99 Compact, which is what I'm holding here. It is analogous to like a Glock 26. It's a little bit larger than a Glock 26, but it's also a little bit lighter. It weighs 18 ounces. It has a 3.5-inch barrel, and it has a double stack 10-round magazine, M9. Now, when these came out, they have this mag here with the finger rest. They also came with a flush fit 10-round mag as well. Like I said, it's about Glock 26 size. Now, this one here does have the QA trigger. Notice it's completely dead. Cock it. We have a Glock style trigger, but it does not have the safety in the trigger. It still does have a decocker, although it is smaller. So we can cock it. Let's say we chamber around, and then we want to make the weapon safe. We can decock it. We can have a loaded chamber with a dead striker behind it. I always thought that was a good idea. I always wish the Glock had a decocker. This trigger is heavier than the single action on the standard P99. It's about 7.5 pounds with a longer pull, not excessive, but it was mostly made for police departments, the QA trigger was, and for just people wanting to do concealed carry. That's why I always thought it was a good match for the P99C. So aside from being smaller, in 2004 and 2005, Walther introduced a round of changes to the design. Starting at the muzzle, and like I said, I don't have a full size to show you of this style, but the compact will work. We have a standard Picatinny rail, open rail, with one notch under the barrel. The trigger guard was given a more rounded contour. The so-called ski hump under the trigger was deleted. The magazine release was extended. As you can see, it's more than double the length to make it easier to reach. The slide serrations were made longer and much wider to easier to grasp. And some would have an ambidextrous slide stop. This one does not. Most of the ones sold in the USA still have the standard P99, but in Europe they would offer it as an optional feature to have an ambidextrous slide release. We would have to wait to the PPQ to get that over here, which we will get to in a minute. Now, this is one thing I can't show you on this gun, but with the Gen 2s as they became known, they went from a 16-round slick-sided mag like this to a 15-round vertically ribbed mag. They reduced it by one, but they, I presume they increased reliability. So there is a difference in magazines between Gen 1 and Gen 2. But these went into production. They introduced some changes in 2004 and others in 2005, but the Gen 2s were out by then. You'll see some people call like Gen 1.5, so they'll call the intermediate ones Gen 2s and then the full-fledged ones Gen 3s. I'd like to keep it simple and just say Gen 1, Gen 2, because that's basically, it was just a transitional period over about 18 months where they were doing some of the changes. But yeah, the P99 Compact is, again, it's a neat little gun. For the era it was made in, it was considered quite small, but it is still as wide as a standard gun because it's a double stack. So, it's decent for conceal and carry, but it is a little fat. But then again, so is the Glock 26. Now today we all know the solution. Companies do the single stack guns. But in 2005, that really wasn't a thing that anyone did. Until Walther did it. This is the original style Walther PPS Police Pistol Slim. Now this is in this video for the P99 because this is basically a P99 made for concealed carry. Walther introduced this in 2007 as ostensibly a replacement for its traditional PPK line. But unlike the PPK, which was in 32 and 380, the PPS was in 9mm and later 40 cal. It is essentially a P99C made single stack. It's just about an inch wide. It has a 3.2-inch barrel, so just a smidge shorter. Still has the paddle mag release. The styling's a little different because instead of having two paddles, we have one large one. Has metal sights, unlike the other two that have polymer. Very streamlined appearance, not much to snag on. We have a short Picatinny rail under the barrel. Still uses the same Glock style, Browning style tilting barrel. It is striker fired. It's like the P99QA, but it does have a Glock style safety on the trigger now. That's the only external safety on this gun. Now these came with 3 different sizes of magazine. This is a 6-round. It allows for a flush fit, as you saw. Next we have a 7-round, which allows for a reasonably full grip. You might have a pinky somewhat hanging off, but you have 7 rounds and a much larger grip. And then you have an 8-round, which when inserted gives the same size grip as a P99. At least, it's slimmer, of course, but you do get a full grip with an 8-shot, 8+1. So, by today's standards, this is not remarkable. A lot of companies do a slim polymer striker-fired gun, but in 2007, no one virtually did. This was something kind of like with the back straps that Walther would pioneer and others would copy later on. I mean, only recently his Glock finally copied it, but before that, others like the Smith & Wesson Shield did. So this is the PPS, and it was really the first of its breed. And I think, considering it was such a pioneer for what it did, they did a fantastic job with it. Now, one element that people complain about on the original PPS is the back strap. It comes with 2, a small and a large. And if you remove it, there's a lever here. Let's put it on camera here. There's a little lever, and you got to basically overcome spring tension, and this back strap pops off. Now, it has this little metal pin in it. When that's out, the gun is disabled. It can't cock. The gun's dead. Now, when this came out, people worried up and down that this would break or become unreliable, either way rendering the gun unusable. This has been out for 10 years now, and I have never seen a confirmed report of that back strap giving trouble. At least not within normal use. I'm not talking about if you dropped it out of a moving car or off 20-foot balcony. Maybe it might. Who knows? But through normal wear and tear, these things have held up fine. The internet and the gun community, and really any community of any collecting type, kind of likes to see problems maybe where they could potentially exist. And I admit that could have been a potential problem, but it never proved to be one. So just because something might be a problem doesn't mean it will be a problem. And that's really what the PPS was with this backstrap. I understand why they did it. Do I like it? Not really. But it's better than like a lot of the lawyer safeties out there where you need a key. It's certainly no more risky than all the Smith & Wessons out there that require a key to activate or deactivate. But yeah, this is the original slim gun, and it's definitely based on the P99. Operating system's the same. You can definitely see a family resemblance here. Alrighty, we'll move on. Now, after the P99 Gen 2 series and P99 Compact and PPS were introduced, Walther didn't sit on its laurels. It began working on what was known as the P99Q. Now, the P99Q was designed especially for German police and then also other police departments in general. And we really have never seen a P99Q much in the USA because they were just for LE sales. But what we got instead was the Walther PPQ. This has essentially all of the features of the P99Q plus a really good trigger. Now this is the first edition, so it has a threaded barrel, and I have a laser light on it here just because of when the suppressors are on it, you can't use the sights, so ignore that. Now this is the PPQ. This is the original P99. Very obviously the same gun. Just has a couple of facelifts later. Now with the P99 Gen 2, we kind of went away from the square trigger guard. And then with the P99Q and PPQ, we've kind of gone back to it because it's really better for devices and also using your offhand with the gun. We still have a 4-inch barrel. Well, not on this one because of the threaded barrel, but normally a 4-inch barrel. We've added front serrations as well as the Gen 2 style rear. Now on the PPQ, we've done away with the decocker. This finally has the ambidextrous slide release as standard. This was optional in the P99, and a few P99s were imported into the USA with this slide stop. And it's very stiff on an empty mag. There we go. Now I pulled this mag out. This is a Gen 2 P99 mag for all intents and purposes. As you can see, it has the ribbing. Normally these held 15 rounds. This one has the +2 extended base plate on it. And the only difference between a PPQ mag and a P99 Gen 2, the Gen 2 P99 mags were blued, and these have more of a conifer or park type finish, basically a more all-weather resistant type finish on them, a little more durable. One other thing, on the original Gen 1 mags, the witness holes were on the sides. With the Gen 2s, they're on the back. Now the grip was also redesigned. We still have the same general contours that Marenghi designed all those years ago. Or sorry, Marini. I'm having Beretta flashbacks here, apologies. But it has a texture to it, with actual finger grooves wrapping all around now. And we still have the interchangeable back straps. That's pretty much it for the upgrades with the P99Q and where it goes. Now where the PPQ goes differently is the trigger. This is essentially a really slicked up P99QA trigger. And now we have a Glock style safety on it, much like on the PPS. This is because it's a really light trigger for a polymer gun. We have some take up, and then we have a stage. These tend to break at anywhere from 4 to 5.5 pounds, depending on where. This one's at about 4.5 because I've had it for several years and it's nicely worn in. When you charge it and let off, it has just over 0.1 of an inch reset. You can really get off some nice rapid fire shots. That's another thing, because of the short light trigger, they really wanted to have an additional safety on it just to make sure it would not get accidentally hit. This was introduced in the US market in 2011 and was a really good hit for Walther. It kind of came out of nowhere to a lot of Americans, standard size mag, and did extremely well for what it was. It really has kind of put Walther back on the map here in the USA. In Europe, the PPQ isn't so much. Instead, they have the P99, which has been used by quite a few police departments too. And it has been very successful over there. It looks about the same as this, except it doesn't have the super light short trigger. It intentionally has a heavier trigger with about a 7.5 pound pull and a slightly longer reset of about 0.2 to 0.3 inches. It's still an improvement over the original QA trigger or a Glock stock Glock trigger, but the police weren't really comfortable with a trigger like this, which is basically near competition grade for a polymer gun. But yeah, the PPQ, there's a lot of reviews out there on it. Not much more to say about it. It's essentially a P99 Gen 3 for all intents and purposes. And it's a very good gun. It's been out for 6 years now. And I've had phenomenal luck with mine. So after that, after the PPQ came out and was a hit for Walther, they decided to kind of change things up and also expand their production line. Scoot this over here. Smith & Wesson had been the importer, but in 2013, Walther opened up its own subsidiary called Walther USA in Fort Smith, Arkansas, which is just down the road from us here. Now, Walther had been bought out as a company by Umrich, the airsoft company, back in the 90s. Now, Umrich has one of their offices, their home office here in Fort Smith too, so the move was logical. That said, Umrich is not making these guns. The ones you've seen today have all been made in Ulm, Germany, including this one here. This is the Walther PPX, introduced in 2013. This is their economy model. It is still based on the original P99. You can definitely see a similarity, especially in the grip. It's about the same size, weight, has the same kind of PPQ style trigger, has a longer rail under the barrel than the P99, about the same length as a PPQ. It has its own mag that holds 16 rounds, so it's not interchangeable. It has a P99 or PPQ-ish grip, but it has a fixed back strap now, which is set at about medium, which is right for most people. It's one of the economies they did. It has just a single-sided slide release here. And it actually has a very nice trigger. And the trigger system is interesting on the PPX. It is a hammer inspired by a striker. It's surprisingly nice for a $300 gun. It really is, and they break in well. Another change that's probably important to a lot of Americans is we go away from the trigger guard mag release, which I love, to the Browning style button release here. It is reversible, so you can put it on the other side for left-handers, but if you put it on that side, then it's inconvenient for right-handers. I still feel the paddle style is superior, but people prefer this by and large. I think Walther released something saying it was about a 80-20 split. So for every one person who liked the paddle style like myself, there was 4 that preferred the other style, so they went with it. Even though this is an economy model, some of the areas they saved were it's a 2-piece barrel, much like a Smith & Wesson revolver is today. The hammer system's a little cheaper to produce than the striker. But on the other hand, it still has metal components, which I think is great. The sights are metal. The mag release button is metal. The takedown is metal. I think that's great. The trigger is also metal. Now, I'm sure it's MIM. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure it's not forged metal, but I'm sure it's MIM or maybe in some cases stampings. But at least they didn't go completely plastic. This is one of those guns that does not look good. As we joked in our video years ago, it's almost like number 1 in an FPS video game, default pistol. But when you handle it, it feels and shoots a lot better than you would think. I mean, you see me with these other guns here, and I still have a PPX. It's a fun gun to shoot in its own right. But this came out in 2013 as their economy version of the P99, essentially. They also have a little cheaper box. It's just a simple case with foam, and it still does come with the spare mag, though. So they cheapened it up, but really not where it would hurt people. Now, after that, because people prefer that button release, they also came out with the PPQ M2. This is the same gun as the M1, the original. It's sometimes called the Classic today, except it does have this reversible Browning style button. Now this one here, since I don't have a 9mm M2 to show you, is actually the newer 45, which just recently came out about 2 years ago. But it's the same as the 9mm, except it's a little bit larger, heavier slide, and the barrel is about a 0.4 inch longer for the 45 caliber. It holds 12 rounds in its own magazine here. Still has interchangeable back straps. Has the long rail under the barrel. Has the excellent PPQ trigger. Still no decocker. And is otherwise the same as the 9mm. This is the 45 version that came out. This was actually the first production 45 that Walther has ever really had. They've always gone with 32s, 380s, 9s, 40s. They've never really, this is really their first venture, at least in a long time. I'm not saying they didn't make some obscure gun back in the 30s and made 1,000 of them, but to my knowledge, major production, this is the first 45 that they've done. Again, comparing it to the original P99, you can definitely see still very much a resemblance. So that's the PPQ M2 series. And that's pretty much what you get today because that's what people wanted. I still prefer the M1 or Classic style myself, but personal choice, you know. Well, after revamping the P99, the PPQ, and even the PPQ M2, Walther decided it was time to kind of look at the PPS again. Just get a few things out of the way. Here's the original we looked at just a few minutes ago. And here is the new PPS M2, which just came out about a year ago. So some of the changes. Basically, they gave it the same changes that the PPQ had over the P99. We have front slide serrations now. We have a slightly reshaped slide in general. We have a more ergonomic grip with finger grooves and texturing. It's not super coarse, but it's not super fine. I really like the texturing on these. We also went from the paddle style mag release to a button style here. It's a smaller button because this is meant as a carry gun. And consequently the mags were changed. Leave that out for a second. Now if you notice, there's no back strap now that can come off. Again, that was a major concern when the original gun came out in 2007. So when they released this in 2015, they went to a fixed back strap because that's what people wanted, and Walther is obviously trying. They also deleted the front rail and made this more angular and smooth up here. This is because people weren't really using the front rail section, and it made holsters a little harder to get in and out of, and just not needed, and they could streamline it up, and they probably saved a couple of dollars not having to mold it exactly, so on and so forth. Another thing they did is they kind of smoothed up the trigger. Now this is a carry gun. Could they have given it a PPQ style trigger? Yes, they could have. But that would not be wise for a carry gun. They did go in though to the original PPS trigger and smooth it up, make it a little bit lighter, just a little more pleasant. I would definitely say that trigger is a little bit nicer. This one has a little more grit to it and is maybe a pound heavier. It's not a huge difference, but it's almost like having a tuned trigger, a trigger job. So since it comes right out of the box like this, and this gun was actually cheaper when it came out, the M2, than the M1 did when it came out, hey, you get a nicer trigger for less money. So, can't hurt. Now this one is the so-called PPS M2 LE edition. It has basically glow-in-the-dark sights. If you shine a flashlight on them for 10-20 seconds, they'll stay illuminated for 15-20 minutes. You know, they're metal sights, that's nice. Like with the original, we have a 6-round flush fit mag for a short grip. We have, and really I'm looking here, the 7s and the 8s are really hard to tell apart on these. They're very similar. We have a 7-round mag, which again, I actually think the 7's a little bit longer on the M2 than it is on the original PPS. But it's still a little bit shorter than the 8. I have a 7-round mag here for a fuller grip. And we've got an 8. Did I mix the 7 and 8 up? I don't know, doesn't matter. Anyway, 2 different types of grips, 6, 7, and 8. And gives you different grip options. Sorry on this one, I'm a little mixed up because I let a friend borrow this to see if his wife would like to buy one, and they loved it. So my mags aren't exactly where I had them placed before, maybe. No big deal. You get the idea. You still can just kind of set the size of the gun based on the grip itself. Again, this just came out. Now, one gun you're not seeing here today is Walther's CCP. I thought about including it in this video, but it really is just too far removed from the P99. The CCP is a very different critter. It has a different operating system, and it just didn't really fit. I wanted to kind of at least keep this video semi-focused and show where this gun led to with guns like this and the PPQ M2. When the first time I bought a P99 was 2000. And I called the local store up and asked them if they had any in stock, and they said yes. And I was thrilled. I got a ride over there. I was sitting at the counter with my hand out, waiting for the guy to put it in my hand, and as soon as he did, I knew I was going to buy this gun. You got to remember, this is 2000. the Glock Gen 3 had just come out. Guns weren't especially light or ergonomic back then. This thing fit my hand like a glove. I mean, it was one of the best feeling high capacity, you know. Of course, back then you had to have 10 rounds. But, you know, they can hold up to 16 and 9. I knew I was going to buy it. I did. It's been a great gun. I picked up the C from CDNN about 2010 when they had them on sale. I just thought, why not? It'd be kind of cool to have a compact. When the original PPQ came out, I didn't think much of it. And I looked at it and I thought, okay, it's a tuned gun. I went ahead and ordered one on a lark, though, and was really, really happy I did. I really like the PPQ. It's a nice upgrade of the original. And when this PPS came out, I was actually in Ulm, Germany in 2007. And when I got back to the U.S., about December of that year, I picked one up at my friend's gun shop. At that time, I didn't have my FFL yet. So I picked a PPS up. That isn't this one here. My cousin talked me out of that one. And since by that time I did have my FFL, I let him have my original, and I just picked up another one. So my original PPS is still in the family, but I got this replacement about 2009, 2010, something like that. Hey, it shut my cousin up. But I really like the PPS. For its size, it shoots really well, and again, for when it came out, it was a pretty revolutionary concept. Obviously, it was a good one because everyone has copied it. And that's pretty much where we're at today. I like the newer PPS M2, although I still like the original mag release more. I do like the nicer trigger and the slightly more comfortable grip on this. The front serrations are always a good thing. I do like front serrations. It just gives you more flexibility operating your weapon. But yeah, I just thought we would kind of look at the P99s again. We did several years ago, but it's been a long time. And it was really time to do it again. A lot of people give other guns a lot of love. And really, again, even the PPX for what it is. Now today this has been replaced by the Walther Creed, and these are no longer in production as such, but the Creed is basically an M2 of this, but I still like this one better. And the name Creed just doesn't fit with the whole P series that Walther's ever done. They're still operating out of Fort Smith, Arkansas. This is 2017. They're still bringing in guns. They're still trying to increase their product line, and I'm glad Walther has made kind of a resurgence in the American market. They kind of died off after the P88, or even really before. And it's great to see yet another competitor in the market. Even if you're a Glock fan, I think you have to admit, guns like this and the Smith & Wesson are what inspired the Glock Gen 4 to come out, and Glock to keep improving itself with the G42 and then the G43. If it hadn't been for the PPS, the G43 would have never come to be. But yeah, just kind of wanted to visit the gun here and shoot it a bit for you on camera and just talk about it again. If you have any questions at all about the P99, PPS, PPQ, please put them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer. Again, I've been an owner of this style of gun for over 15 years now, and have some trigger time with it. And yeah, we'll just talk there. If you really appreciate you tuning in, and this is Misha, and please check in soon for hopefully more interesting videos. Thank you.